Well, first of all, tell for the folks that are on the call that don't know who you are, Jose, give us 30 seconds on your backstory. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this business. Yeah.
So this year will be 20 years in real estate for me. I run a couple teams. So I have a couple different organizations that I'm part of. So I am OP of 2 market centers. We have 7 locations. We have about 600 agents under those 2 market centers. And then I run a couple sales teams in Cleveland and Canton. Between those 2 teams last year, we did about 1,100 transactions. And then we also have an organization called Powered by Impact, which partners with real estate teams to help them hit their financial and production goals, basically.
Super. Yeah. Very cool. Now, how does somebody with a background in communications and religion get into real estate? Help me bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had a short stint as working in higher education at a university, and quickly realized that I was not going to be an employee, and being an employee just wasn't in my DNA. And so I quickly sought out what's the best opportunity for an entrepreneur, and real estate opened up, and 1.5 years later, here I am.
And here you are. Got it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, the reason that I asked you to join us today is because I have, for the last, 12 months or so, completely ripped off something that I heard you say on, I can't remember I think it was a masterminds call. I think it was one of our maybe spring masterminds last year. And it was this idea of the kind of the laws of leadership, the 3 basic rules of leadership. And what I heard, so first of all, correct me if I misheard it, but what I heard you say was rule number one is to set very clear expectations. Rule number 2 is to inspect what you expect. And then the third rule was to provide training and resources necessary so that folks could accomplish the task. First of all, did I hear those correctly?
You did, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll tell you kind of where they were born from, Phil.
Yeah.
So I get the opportunity to lead a lot of people in what I do, and read as many leadership books as there are out there. And at the end of the day, I just needed something to simplify what it means to be a leader to people, right? And what is my responsibilities as a leader? And so kind of an interesting timing as I was listening to a podcast. So just as you ripped that off from me, I ripped it off from someone else, a podcast, and they kind of just laid out these 3 kind of concepts. And it kind of came at an interesting time. It was early 2020, and we were having a difficult conversation on our team. And this was post that difficult conversation where we had an ISA that just wasn't meeting standards, and we had to make the hard decision that person wasn't a fit for our team. And so shortly after that, I came across this podcast, and I said, this is really this signifies what we should be doing as a leader and how we should be interacting with people on our team, because it just gave me crystal clarity of what my responsibility, if I'm going to call myself a leader, like everyone on this call, if I'm going to call myself a leader, these are my fiduciary responsibilities to the people that I am bringing on, that I'm taking on as a leader. And it just really kind of simplified it and made me clear of what my role as a leader and a boss was. And we can dive into each one of those 3, but it just simplified it for me, right?
What were you describe, if you can, and it may have been maybe too long ago, but what were you doing before that? Before you had that clarity, what was your leadership style like?
Well, so in this particular situation, what it allowed me to do is we had to make a hard decision that the ISA that we had wasn't hitting the numbers that we had. Right. Okay. And so after that conversation, there was a feeling in me that was, were we crystal clear on what we were expecting? And I think we were. Was it reinforced over and over and over again? Did he know exactly what he was responsible for? Did we give him every opportunity? And so through that, I think the answer was yes. But to have these 3 simple steps to say, yes, I did this, yes, I did this, yes, I did this, and now I can make a hard decision in my organization, makes you sleep that much better at night, that you gave that person every opportunity and you did your job as the leader in that conversation.
Yeah, and you mentioned that I would very much appreciate, and whether that's you or Danielle or both, what do those three things look like in the organization right now? What does expectation setting, for example, look like for somebody in one of your organizations?
Yeah. So again, the first one is set crystal clear expectations and standards to succeed in the role. And so I think as a leader, like all of you guys are, is you throw a lot of stuff at people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're anything like me, like the person's job description has a lot going on with it. And so my question is what is their top 20%? As the leader, what is their top 20%? And then do they have crystal clarity that that's their top 20%, right? So the job description may have 25 things on it,
Mm-hmm.
but if the world's on fire, what are the 5 things that absolutely have to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if nothing else happens, and then you may know that answer, but my question is do they know that answer?
Do they?
Like
Yeah.
compare notes and ask them that question. Like, what's your top 20? What does success in your role look like? And making sure that they're 100% clear on it. And then I think one thing that I do, I don't know if anybody else on the calls can relate to this, is you move fast, right? You're all building a real estate team. You're all trying to get to the next level. So you go fast throughout the day. And our job is to remind them over and over and over and over again, what is the top 20% and what does success in that role look like? And so to me, what that looks like is first interview, second interview, day 1, day 2, and so forth and so on, until they know that 100% clear and you guys are all on the same page there.
Got it. How long, in your experience, how long does it take to settle into that common perspective?
I think it's different for every person on the team.
Yeah.
So put Danielle on the spot. Danielle is relatively new in the last 6 months to our organization. We spent the first whole 2 days. I run a lot of organizations, and we spent the whole first 2 days of her on the job going over expectations and the culture and all of that. So different people pick it up at different
rates. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Danielle?
Yeah, I was going to also add, like, I think we also, I mean, with everybody in our organization, from the leadership roles down to the agents that we're bringing on, like, we have a clear 30, 60, 90 with every single person, which I'm sure most of you guys have. And, you know, Jose, when you and I met and we spent 2 days together, we were like, okay, what do we want to see in 30 days? So here's the outline for it. What else do we want to see in 30 days? And then after 30 days, we're meeting and making sure that those expectations were met. What else do we want to add for 60 days? So I think that's something that our team does very well, is we don't just give the 30, 60, 90. We are meeting with it, and we are going back to it. And that kind of goes into number 2, inspect what you expect. But setting those clear expectations up front so that they have a map, they have a guide, and then sticking to it. I think by 90 days, though, you're asking them, like, what is your 20%? And they should be able to answer that.
Yeah. So I have not heard that kind of crafting, that idea of crafting the 30, 60, 90 together and I can absolutely see how that would have an impact. Not that you're giving them the freedom to, you know, a new member of the team and full freedom, it doesn't sound like, but the idea of getting ownership early around what it contains is a really powerful concept.
Yeah,
I think it depends on the role too. I think, Jose,
Sure.
you would agree with that. Like, I think if you're hiring for something specific that you've had in the past, then it's going to be a little bit more regimented and strict. And when you're bringing somebody on and they have a background in something, or, you know, they're bringing their own ideas, I do think it gives them some ownership, which empowers them.
Yeah. If we're bringing on a buyer agent, I'm not sure that they have a lot of say in what happens in the 30, 60, 90, because we've had other buyer agents and we know what's reasonable and expect, you know, like, but with Danielle's, it was my first hire of that sort. And so it was a conversation. It wasn't like, this is what your 30, 60, 90 is. I'm pretty sure this is what it is. And you tell me if you think that that's realistic.
Yeah. I think that's also that too. I mean, it depends on the role, and if you've hired 100 of them, you know what success is. You have a better idea what success looks like. Yeah.
So yeah, that rolls us into like the number 2, and I think this is probably the area that I probably still struggle with, and probably most leaders, I would say, probably struggle with as well, is inspecting what you expect. The second part of that is on a regular basis, right? And so the regular basis is the tricky part, because again, everyone on this call has multiple hats that they're wearing throughout the day. And so as you bring someone on, making sure that you're not just setting them off and then you come back 6 months and you're frustrated with the hire, right? I think we've all done that before, is where we take the guardrails off too soon, and then we come back and inspect and it looks a lot different than what we thought, right? And so we come back and we're frustrated, and you know, it just isn't what we thought it should be. And so making sure that you're not micromanaging, but you're also like giving them guardrails to make sure that you know what they want, and then you're checking in on that on a regular basis. And so what I've seen how that looks is, you know, day one, you know, you're probably checking in every hour. Day two, you might be checking in every hour, but at some point you're transitioning to, maybe it's not every hour, but maybe it's every day, right? And then at some point it's every week or a couple times a week. And at some point we're every month we're talking, or every quarter that we're talking. And at some point in my world, you're running a department, right? And so it's taking those guardrails and kind of widening them once you know that what you are inspecting is actually happening.
It's happening. Yeah. Is that something, in your opinion, as a leader of multiple organizations, your bandwidth is limited, and you can't be with everybody all the time, right? How do you use leverage, either people, tools, or systems, to inspect if you yourself are constrained by time and other commitments? Can you, I guess maybe, can you use leverage? Or when you say inspect with frequency, do you mean as the leader you take on that role?
So here's what I would say is, one, inspecting does not take long.
Okay.
It doesn't. It can be a 5-minute conversation. Danielle, when you and I were first starting out, like we would jump on a phone call at 5 o'clock to go over what you had accomplished that day or those last couple of days, correct?
Yeah.
It wasn't like we need to sit down for an hour and go over it, but tell me what you did, where we at in 30, 60, 90 and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to. Yeah, it doesn't have to.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say, you can also leverage other people. So like with your larger team that you have, like there's leverage through other people as well, obviously, as the organization and the team grows, to do the inspecting for you.
I think that's an area where people struggle, right? It is this, we struggle with this idea that inspection needs to provide also, inspection must include or should include training and consulting, and, you know, and all of a sudden the conversation is an hour long.
I don't feel that way. I mean, and I just went through this process. Like I said, I'm OP of 2 market centers, and I just hired a general manager to kind of run my day to day. He went through the same process. He had a 30, 60, 90, and we were literally talking every day we just transitioned into that, and we're probably going to talk once a week. And so it doesn't have to take long. And if you do it, it's not going to take a long time.
Doesn't take a long time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, so that's the thing I often hear on this step, is that I don't have the time for that. I'm not sure if I have the time for it. And here's what I would say is, you're going to invest the time one way or another. And what that means is, you're going to either invest the time now up front, or that person's not going to succeed, and you're going to go through the hiring process all over again, right? And so you're going to invest the time one way or another. It's just, do I want to do it now with this person, or am I going to be running an Indeed ad in 6 months because I didn't launch this person the right way? Yeah.
So out of inspection then is providing training and resources. What does that look like? What's the feedback and or, you know, loop to ensure that people are getting the training and resources that they need?
Yeah, to me, it's a very simple conversation at the end of every one-on-one that I do, which is, what do you need from me?
Okay, just that simple.
I mean, I'm just trying to make it very simple,
Yeah.
But like, what do you need from me? Do you need further training? Do you need a webinar? Do you need to go to this seminar? Do you need more of my time? Do you need less of my time? Like, what do you need from me to make sure that you're successful to the next time we meet?
Yeah.
It's not complicated. It's just remembering to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Danielle?
I was just going to say, like, from somebody who has been onboarded with your organizations in the last, 6 months or so, like, I appreciate that. And I think sometimes at our one-on-ones, I'm like, I don't have anything that I need from him. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's good to know that, like, hey, this is a quick one-on-one. Let's get through our list. What do you need from me at the end? And like, both parties ask, like, what do you need? And then we move on. If there's nothing, great. And if there's things, like, let's get into it and move on from it. Again, I think it's just like the ownership process and the questions at the end, like, it just makes that onboarding process and that leadership process, it makes the person who's onboarding feel better, knowing that, like, that's how we're closing out this meeting. Like, what do you need from me?
What do you need from me? Yeah, that you just kind of answered the question that I had in my mind. What, as a person who has been on the other side of the table, as the other side of the desk, what does that do? What is the clarity around expectation setting, inspection, and training? What does that do for you as a member of the organization?
I think it makes me feel like my voice is being heard. I also think one thing that has been different for me coming into this organization is, we have set meetings on this day. And so it's like, let's both make a list of what we need from that person. And most of the things are going to get crossed off before we actually meet anyways. And so that list gets very small by the time we get to the end of that meeting and we ask each other, like, what do you need from me? I think it leaves a lot of room for transparency in a relationship too. So, and when you end the call like that, when you end the conversation like that, again, I think as the person on the other side, it feels like I feel more appreciated and like what you need from me matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other side of that, as the leader and by interacting and living through those three principles, I think if you break those rules and you, again, have to make a hard decision, there's a certain bit of guilt or worry, because the reality is as a leader and you're bringing on people into your organization, you're giving them an opportunity to provide for their family. So like, it's something that I'm sure everyone on this call, like, you don't take that lightly, right? And you want to be able to sleep at night. You want to be able to make sure that you're giving them the framework to have success. And I think if you break those rules, then you should, as a leader, feel somewhat of like, I'm not living up to my responsibility to these people that have trusted me to come in my organization. And then on the flip side of that is, if you do live by them, there's a lot of peace around decision making. Just a real life example, we had it's called a client care coordinator. It's someone who's responsible for planning our client events, getting reviews online, working our database, and so forth. And so she was not living up to our expectations. And my director of operations and I sat down and said, how do we correct this? And we use this as a guideline to say, all right, we have to do a complete reset to say, these are the expectations. And is she 100% clear? And let's take the next 30 days to make sure that she's 100% clear. And then meanwhile, we're inspecting it. And so we took about 60 days, maybe 90 days even, to make sure that we're going through each one of these three steps. And then at the end of it, if she's not living up to the expectations, we have complete peace with the decision of, is this person the right fit for our organization, or is this person not the right fit? And I also think what happens is, for current employees, by giving them this framework, they know what the playing field is too, right? They have peace about how the organization's run, how decisions are made, and so forth. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it raises that idea that the path, you can always restart, in a way, a 30, 60, 90. If you have that as a framework, you can just say, look, we owe each other the opportunity to restart the expectation setting. I feel like we're not, there's a portion of the job that's not being fulfilled. The mission's not being accomplished, and I'm sure there's confusion on the part of the other person, right? The member of the team. So let's start again. Let's hit the reset button, restart 30, 60, 90. Let's get crystal clear on the expectations, and you can rediscover whether the relationship is working or not. So.
Yeah, and I think there's for the leader, there should be some type of, I apologize that we've gotten off track, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard to say sometimes in a play, but I apologize, we've gotten off track, and I care about your success. I care about you being part of this organization, and let's make sure that we are moving forward in a path that's clear for all parties.
Yeah. Provides a path to that conversation, through to that conversation. Yeah. Great. I want to open it up. So who's got a question? Just take yourself off mute. We got Jose and Danielle here. I would love to hear what questions you have for these two rock stars. Who's got a question for either one of them? And this is not a shy group, so I assume we're going to turn shy this morning. So who's got a question for him, for Jose? Anybody?
I have a question. Hi, Jose.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Leslie, how are you?
Hi, Danielle. Hey, guys. So I was wondering how deep into specificity you go with your 30, 60, 90s and what you've learned along the way. I know we try and set SMART goals and everything. So I'd love to hear how that, I'll bet you're really good at it now, and I'm struggling a little. So.
Yeah, it's been an evolution. And Phil, what I could do is we could send out our 30, 60, 90 for a buyer agent, for example.
That'd be great. Yeah, love that. Thank you.
Be happy to send that out to you guys. If you want that, you can put your email address in the chat. If you want a copy of that, we can send it out to you. And so it's very specific. So for example, at the end of 30 days, I think I'm going to get this right. At the end of 30 days, they have to have 100 fully formed contacts ready to be put into our database, right? And so that started off as bring your database with you and we're going to put it into our database. And then it formed into, we need a fully formed. And so it's evolved over time, but it's very specific. You have to hold, I'm going to get some of these numbers wrong, but you have to do 6 open houses in the first 30 days, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to follow the follow-up plan on the open house. And so it's very, very specific because quite honestly, people have looked for loopholes. And so we just need to be very specific that they need to be completed by the first 30 days. And then we get the opportunity to move on to the next 30 days, right?
And how is that different? I mean, the measurements can be very clear for an agent, whereas somebody in your hub, it's different set of measurements, reviews and error-free and things like that.
Yeah, so it's very clear I think it's going to be a little bit more abstract with like numbers, right? So if it's a person that does photography, to have mastery over the photography process, it's going to be a little bit more vague. Okay. And the person that they're reporting to is going to have a good understanding of what checks that box and what doesn't check the box. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit more vague just because you can't do as much. But for example, a client care person, one of our metrics is 70% of our closings is to leave an online review, right? And so, and we exclude the repeat clients because that messes up the numbers, but 70% of all closings should be leaving an online review, a 5-star online review. And so that's a very measurable aspect. And I think as we've dove more into it, our director of operations has put a lot of metrics that are measurable that you can really kind of dig your teeth into. So
thanks very much.
And I heard in there it's an evolution as well, right? You try it, see what works, revise, improve. Yeah. Good. Other questions? Well, we have Jose and Danielle here. Anybody else? Where do you see people get it wrong? Where do you see people struggle with these rules?
It's a matter of, it's very rarely the third one.
Yeah.
Like giving them the tools and stuff. It's either my 20% and what's in my head of their 20%. That's the big thing. Like what's in my head of what they should be succeeding at is not line up with what they should be succeeding.
Well, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably the big one. And I think that you guys are all rainmakers on this call.
Yeah.
Sometimes what's in our head, we don't always get down on paper or get to the other person. Is that only me or is there anybody else?
Pretty sure that's everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So just making sure that you're really slowing down that process and getting that information out to everyone.
And that's, I heard in there 2 steps. Number 1, getting it out of your head. Number 2, getting alignment on it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Jose,
Right.
Bob Gill from the Boston area. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon. This is terrific. Just a kind of follow up to Leslie's comment or question. The whole idea of SMART goals, that to me is the answer to it, is the SMART goals. And even for things that aren't so quantifiable, the goal, you can get there. And it's similar to Philip's question, but is that when you set expectations, they need to be in writing. There's no question about if it's not in writing, it's not set. I mean, it could be in a head. So if it's in writing up front, you've either at least conceptually agreed to it. Maybe the interpretation is different, but it's there. And then you're meeting with the person. I assume when what's the frequency? I didn't hear. What's the frequency of meeting, coaching meeting? Is it a weekly meeting?
Well, when they first start, we're probably talking every day.
Okay, but that's just kind of getting up the curve. But just getting beyond that, what your organization? What's the standard for coaching? Is it a weekly coaching meeting, 30 minutes? What do you have one?
For me, for people that report to me, it's every 2 weeks is when we meet.
Okay.
It's usually less than an hour because my attention span doesn't go that long.
And what is the other is? Yeah, and with mine, I meet with all my team members weekly. It's a half an hour. It's a standard time every week, and it's a half an hour coaching session. And what's interesting is, and so there's lots of learnings. I can see why we get, as you call it, getting off track, because we're a bit off track right now. It's like it's Philip and I have talked about, I think just yesterday. But if you're meeting and they have job descriptions, the top 20 is, it's written down. And when you meet, whether it's biweekly or weekly, you're meeting, how you're doing against it in terms of, and the key things for an agent is, where are you against lead generation time, conversion time, number of deals? I mean, because they all have goals about that. And you have the conversation. What causes things? That's pretty specific. What causes things to go up? Why would things go off track if you do that? Because that's the perfect world, and it's not always. So where's the real breakdown? Because that's the way to do it. And if you do that, if we all did that, if I did that, just say it. Let me talk about if I did that on every weekly coaching call and was real specific about it, I wouldn't be having the issues that I'm having right now.
Yeah.
So how do we get around that?
Have your coach hold your feet to the fire. I mean, you're asking, how do I get back to having regular conversations and keeping the first thing first?
No, I do that. I meet with them every week, and the conversation, by the way, isn't as specific as, okay, we have expectations. You have your top 20, your 20%, and every week that would be the conversation. How are we doing against that? And then the second part of it would be, about the training and what do you need from me? I have that. If that happens, if that's the way it is, why are there major issues?
There shouldn't be, shouldn't be.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and this is raising it's sort of a question that I was wondering about. In your organizations, how many folks will you screen on average before you bring in a new hire? And how many will not make it past that, say that 30 days, will not make it through a 30, 60, 90 for you in your world?
Danielle, can you answer how many people do we have to talk to before we actually hire someone?
Yeah. So if we're talking real estate agents, I would say right now we have to talk to 12 people to get one good one for our team. We have high expectations on our team. We have high accountability on our team. And so I would say the amount of people that we're talking to, we have a 3-step interview process with all the teams that we work with as well. And so while they might be a good real estate agent, they might not be a good fit for our team culturally, training wise, accountability, we're running through lists of questions. And so I would ask you, Bob, like, what is the issue that you're having first, right? Like, what is the issue? Are agents leaving? Is it Are they just not hitting goals? Because I think sometimes the expectation conversation has to change. You got to go back to the basics. Like I would ask what issue you're having right now.
So first, the first is that my number is 25 to 30 to hire.
Okay.
Because I've had the experience where I've made bad hires, many bad hires. That's it. So it's 25 to 30, doing a 30, 60, 90. And the issue becomes that the 20%, so that the 20% has been defined, but holding them accountable to that 20% is the issue. And I'll tell you, the biggest single issue for an agent is lead generation. It's time on task. It's committing to, they all say they're doing it, but they're not. And so that's the biggest thing. So for me, that's the biggest, that has led to, I think the biggest issue, that I've had is that they're not held accountable. It's been in there. And so that's why I say it seems like it's simple. And so, as just not, that's what it is. That's not they're not held accountable. And it's the conversation to make sure that gets done.
I also think we are setting like clear expectations through the interview process. So we have daily accountability that is being done within their first 10 transactions. And then we have weekly accountability. It's just a weekly accountability form that every single agent in our organization is completing. It doesn't matter if they're in day 1 or day 500. And so throughout that interview process, we are saying you are expected to make this many phone calls. You are expected to have this many open houses. We're not giving them the 30, 60, 90, but again, we have a high retention rate on our team. Jose, how many people do you have on your team that have been there over 5 or 10 years? Like you have a lot.
We have 10 people over 5 years.
Yeah,
so our intention is to bring people on for longevity. And so we are putting them through that 3-step interview process and setting very clear expectations, because we don't want somebody to come on. We don't want to train them for whatever it is, 30 days or 6 months, and then them leave because ultimately we all decide we're not a good fit for each other. And so during that interview process, we're painting a very clear picture of this is how many calls you'll be making. This is the minimum amount of houses that you must sell to be on our team. Like, are you prepared to do that? And so then they come into it with clear eyes. And I think they come into it more excited because now they know if they do A, B, and C, this is how much money they can make with our team.
Yep. Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I'd say on that is you lax on your people when you have a weak bench. So you lax on your standards if your bench isn't full. So if you can imagine a basketball coach, since we're in March Madness, a basketball coach that has his starting 5 and his starting 5, 1 or 2 of them are struggling, and he looks across and he sees his bench and there's not any talented people on there. He doesn't have many options, right? But if you have 3 or 4 all-stars ready to come off the bench, meaning your pipeline of people that you're bringing into the organization, you feel a lot better about pulling a starting person than you would if you didn't have anybody over there. So
agree. Good point. That absolutely the case. Yep.
Yeah.
So yes, we do. Someone asked it about the questions. We do follow the KPA process. We have a slightly different version. We do group interviews, but we do follow most of the KPA process. We use the KPA, we use DISC, we make them do a lot to get through all of the steps of the organization. We check references, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Of the 12 that you would say start with, I'm just curious, how many of them would follow through with the entire process, regardless of whether you would hire them or not? I mean, how many are you weeding out? Or how many are self-selecting out before you make a decision on, we want you on the team, you're a good cultural fit?
You're saying like once we put somebody into the interview process,
yeah. Are you seeing people say, no, this is, how many of the folks that you put into the interview process at some point decide this is not the right fit for them?
I would say not many of the 12, only because my role is to weed them out in interview 1. So I'm scheduling like a 30-minute interview with them again, start that transparency conversation with them. And so it's my intention not to put them in front of these teams unless I feel like they're the best fit.
Got it.
So most people that get into the first interview make it to the second interview.
Make it, yeah.
Or they're interested. We might not be interested, but they are interested. Because again, it's an application process. So typically we're weeding people out in that first conversation. So I mean, out of the 12, I would say 10 or 11 are
10 or
making
11,
it
most,
through.
yeah, most, you're getting folks that are motivated. You might not choose them, but you're getting excited candidates in that pipeline of 12, and then selecting from there. Okay, yeah, very cool.
We say no more than what we say yes.
Say yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like that idea of the bench too. When we say let's build a bench, one of the risks is we say yes to people we don't want to say yes to fill a bench. Then we make a decision to move somebody in, and then we end up, there's a risk of downgrading your talent out of not holding your standards at that initial stage. You know, if you try and fill the bench too quickly, I mean, that's the
Absolutely.
Right. Other questions while we have Jose and Danielle here? I'm curious, what question did we not ask that you get asked most often? What should we have asked that we didn't? How do you do all this and raise 4 kids?
Have really good people. That's the answer.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good.
No, I think one of the questions that you had emailed about was the real estate market.
Yeah, and I would love to spend a minute or two just before we let you go. What's your take?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you were on the Gary Masterminds last Friday, where he talked about a lot about what he thought was going to be a shift coming up pretty soon. If your guys' markets are like mine, I haven't seen any of that yet. I don't know how you guys have seen that, but I have seen inventory still at an all-time low. I've still seen buyer demand as high as we've ever seen, even with the rising interest rates. And I do feel like we're going to be in this market, the seller's market for the rest of 2022 at least. Okay. When you look at the amount of inventory out there, it's going to be a while before we have enough to be back in a balanced market. At least where I'm at and what I'm seeing in Northeastern Ohio. I don't know if you guys are seeing other things, but we've seen no slowdown. We've seen no increase in inventory. So I think that's part of it. I also think that there's a lot of shifts going on in the real estate market, especially with teams and partnerships with teams. And I don't know, I just seeing the landscape of real estate and the real estate brokerage and real estate partnerships changing a lot in the next 3 to 4 years, I would say too.
Where do you think we will see the change the most?
In the real estate market?
In the industry itself. Yeah.
I see, and this isn't a plug for me and what we do, but
it's okay if you want to plug it too. That's fine.
It's I see teams needing to have more tools and more services than what currently are offered, and more than what most market centers are going to be able to offer. So I think there's a big gap between, and this is me as an OP of 2 market centers. I think there's a big gap between what a market center offers and then what a mega team needs to succeed at a high level. And you can get some of that with coaching, but there's just some tools that I see that these teams are really needing to kind of go through the different levels of MREA and still be profitable and hit different levels. So that's where I see organizations, teams partnering with other teams to be able to offer those tools and those services. Yeah. Have you seen that at all, Phil, with the teams that you talk to?
Absolutely. Yeah, that gap between the team's ability to offer a full and comprehensive suite of services or package of services, both to the clients and to the members on the team, the agents and staff and folks on the team, that the brokerages and market center level can do certain things, but the training, resources, expertise, hiring, technology, layer upon layer upon layer, that just things that our biggest teams or biggest groups legitimately demand that the brokerage can't provide.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just have a hard time providing at scale. So partnership and opportunity. I mean, that whole platform, the idea of there being platform models that you plug into because they fill the gap. I think that's where we're going. I think that's where we're going.
I agree.
Yeah.
I was also
Good
just
stuff.
going to add, for those of you guys who might be looking to add team members to your team, I think right now, especially with the organizations that we're talking to and we're hiring for, there's a lot of solo agents right now that are thinking about joining teams because of where the market is, and working with buyers is hard right now. And so for those of you who are looking to make hires in the near future, you know, we love to hire brand new agents because we can kind of mold them into what we want them to do. And it's sometimes harder to get those licensed agents. And we're seeing a movement of licensed agents who have been in the business a few years who are starting to struggle. And so they're starting to look at teams. So just something that you might want to look into, the agents in your local market, kind of trying to attract them to you, because we're seeing a movement in that.
And not
Daniel,
only
can I
that,
ask-
go
Daniel,
ahead,
can I
Bob.
ask, when you, on the timing, once you filter out the initial interview, how long does it take to get through the process, your KPA, DISC, all of you do, to get someone you're ready to make an offer to? How long is that?
It depends, because we work with a few different teams in a few different states. And so, like, again, because we hire a lot of people who are passing their exam, some of it depends on when they're going to pass your exam. I would say if the person is licensed, we're going to move them through pretty quickly. I would say 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks at max. And that's just because of scheduling purposes. And there are a few assessments that need to happen. But if they're licensed, we're moving them through a little quicker. If they're unlicensed in classes, again, I know it varies state to state, then we're moving alongside of them. We're not interviewing them until they're more than halfway through classes. But if they're licensed, I'm going to say it's pretty quick, 2 weeks, 2.5.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Because they're making a decision. And if they're interviewing with your team, then they're interviewing with other teams. And so we want to make sure that we're having that conversation and quickly with them.
I have a quick question. We have the KPA that we use broadly. What other assessments and tools do you use during the hiring process? I know, like Indeed, you know, you can have different tests that you take. You might use DISC. Any thoughts would be great.
We do use DISC. So Indeed, we use as like the funnel, if you will. We're not typically doing a ton of assessments through there. We do make them jump through one more hoop before we have an initial conversation with them. And then we are DISC profiling them. And then we give them their DISC. We're talking about it in the first interview, and then we're using the KPA as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, one other tool that we've used in the past, and I have it going for one of the hires that I'm doing now, is Spark Hire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Spark Hire allows you to send an email to the candidate that asks whatever questions you want. You can pick the questions, and they have to do a video interview for them. And so what that has done for us is it sorts out a lot of people that you don't want to do an in-person interview with. And it really sorts out, like, man, this person can't communicate the way that I need them to, or whatever the case is. And I think it's like $99 a month or something like that. So if you're doing a lot of hiring, it's definitely worth it. But it's been a tool that has been a huge saver of time for us, for sure.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks.
I have a team that didn't have SparkHire as a tool, didn't have a platform, and asked folks to send videos in, and that was the mechanics of that was too clunky. It was a nice, we got good information back, but not enough information, because having folks try and figure out how to upload the video and send it, and that's where it fell down. So
yeah.
Hey, why can't Zoom? I mean, essentially, Zoom could do the same thing. I mean, you get them on, you do it the face-to-face, you set them up and say, I'd like you to make a presentation. And here's the topic. When you get the same thing, because I understand what you mean, what someone puts on paper versus actually have them present, and you see the body language, you see a variety of things. There's Zoom and an equivalent, an easy alternative to that.
Yeah, that definitely is a possibility. We've also, I'm not sure if we still have it in there because we're doing so much remote hiring, but we had people read a book. It was a small book that maybe took 30 minutes. It was about customer service. For us, it wasn't really about the book. It was a matter of, like, are you going to do what we asked? Are you learning based? And are we going to have a small conversation about it during the interview? And it's another hurdle for them to be part of our organization. Right. And so
do they follow directions?
do they follow directions? Yeah. Because if they don't follow directions on this side of things, once they get in your organization, they're not going to transform themselves. Yeah.
Good. Jose, Danielle, I want to respect your time any other questions before I let these two amazing people go?
I'm gonna put my information in the chat in case anybody has any questions.
I
Please
can do the
do.
same.
Yeah. Share that. We'll share the recording out on our Facebook page. Any parting comments? Anything that we should know either about impact, how to send you referrals? What can we do to return the favor to you for your time today?
No, it was great to chat with you guys. Hopefully you got some value out of it, and hopefully as you go out through your leadership, you can look at things through that lens that just simplifies things and gives you clarity on how to move forward with things.
Perfect. And it just to you both, to everybody on the call, and to you both, next month we've got Ken Pozek with us on how to build a video-based business. And one of the promises I make to everyone who joins us on the calls, if you're willing to join us, we are always welcome back. So if you or anybody on your team wants to be on the call with Ken next month, please join us. That'll be the first Friday in May. I think that's the 5th or the 6th. So that's the invitation to you and to everybody else. And in the meantime, be safe, be well, and have a great afternoon.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
so much for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate
Bye.
it. Bye-bye.